Hello, this is Alyss, and today I'm going to be giving a brief run-through of DD Cabaret, also known as Doom Device Cabaret. So what are DD Cabaret? DD Cabaret are a non-linear combo deck focused on utilizing a toolbox of Nomi monsters and other cards to extend through interruptions and accrue Gehenna Forge counters, which they can use to fulfill the summoning conditions of their monsters, and/or for their boss monsters to use interruption effects. So, in the interest of time, I will not be going through every card in DD Cabaret individually, as they can be quite complicated, but don't be too daunted. I promise you, although this deck is not the easiest to teach, with a little bit of practice, even despite its non-linearity, the little interactions of the cards will become quite clear to you. I'm going to hop into a solo mode now, and go through a few brief lines that you may find useful, in addition to showing how some of the cards interact. Now, for this first demonstration, I'm simply going to award myself the Never-Ending DD Cabaret and a copy of Synfasion. If I can just grab it. Okay. So, we're going to lead with the Never-Ending DD Cabaret, although if you have something to insulate this, by all means use it. When activating Never-Ending, you can pay 1350 LP to set the DD Cabaret of the Gehenna Forged Outcast, which is one of your core cards from your deck. Now, when you lead with Never-Ending, you do not want to activate Outcast immediately. This is because, by default, Outcast has a 50-50 chance to let you search on turn 1, but why take a 50-50 when it can be an 100% chance, as you'll see? So, we'll use Never-Ending to tribute the monster in our hand. As long as it's a DD Cabaret, it doesn't truly matter what it is. You just adapt your line to account for it. In this case, we'll tribute Synfasion. This adds 4 counters to Never-Ending, and triggers Synfasion's once per duel effect to special summon a non-light DD Cabaret monster from your deck. In almost all cases, you want to bring out Psychopomp with this effect. Now with 4 counters on the field, we can simply flip our field, and regardless of the roll, we can search something. Oh, that's very lucky. For the purposes of this demonstration, although in some cases adding a level 8 may be good here, I'm going to add a card which you could add regardless of any roll, which is another copy of Synfasion. Now, Synfasion can use her effect from hand, removing 4 Gehenna Forge counters for cost to special summon herself, and as a part of that special summon, like with Fleur de Lis, she can destroy one card on the field. In this case, we're going to destroy our own Psychopomp, because this can then place 8 Gehenna Forge counters on the Never-Ending DD Cabaret or any other face-up spell of choice. Which is conveniently the cost of Psychopomp's Graveyard Summon effect. So by removing 8 counters again here. By the way, quick side tip, I like to keep a couple counters on each card, just for safety in case of individual target pops. Psychopomp can summon a light or dark monster from graveyard as part of her own summon. Now, because you have 2 level 4 DD Cabarets on field, or indeed any level that is the same, you're going to want to summon DD Cabaret Phantasmagoria. This is an amazing monster that glues the deck together and provides an interruption. By sending Synfasion, by detaching Synfasion, you can send a light or dark monster from your deck to the graveyard. Now, there are many sends here. For example, you can send Carnifex to provide an add to your hand, which can be very useful in some game states, especially as Synphasion and Ablish's effects are not hard once per turn on their special summon from hand effect. Or you can send Maledictus Viator, as if you can resolve Maledictus's cost, she is an incredibly powerful boss monster who can generally win games by herself if supported properly. But in this case, we're going to go for our safest send, which is another copy of Psychopomp. If Dueling Book will not lag, thank you. Now, because Psychopomp was sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can set a DD Cabaret trap from your deck. There are two options here and both are really good. Feast or Famine can target a DD Cabaret monster you control to destroy it, and then bring out any DD Cabaret monster from your deck or graveyard so long as their attribute is different. i.e., if you destroy a light monster, you bring out a dark monster and vice versa. This can be excellent for triggering effects on field, as well as the fact that it triggers the summoning effect of the monster. So for example, if you bring out Synphasion, that becomes a quick pop. Additionally, this activates in the same chain as Feast or Famine, which is important to note and makes it even more difficult to interact to. However, an even safer card, if you can pay the counter cost, is Ethereal Slash, which is essentially an Omni Negate in exchange for 4 counters with a useful graveyard effect. Now, as you can see, we're a little low on counters to resolve all of our effects, and in general, you probably don't want Psychopomp on your field. So what are we going to do? We can simply... Well, you actually have a few options, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're simply going to banish Psychopomp and make a copy of Terpsichorean. And my zone placement. It's quite awful, as generally your Terpsichorean zone should be kept clear, but it's not truly terrible if you don't do so, as you do have a lot of easy ways to get your monsters off the field. In any case, now by using Terpsichorean's effect to place 8 counters on herself due to a summoning condition, you have the protection of Terpsichorean, although do bear in mind it also applies to your opponent's face-up spells, which can cause some issues in certain game states, such as if your opponent activates Lightning Storm. But you can now end the turn with a great amount of counters on field. Why is this important? Because of your grind. By going to the standby phase, you can then resolve the field again, and because you have a very high lead on counters, you can immediately add Maledictus Viator to your deck, which heavily threatens your opponent. This is the basic core strategy of Gehenna Forged. To summon Phantasmagoria by any means, use your traps to threaten your opponent and interrupt them, and then use your immense threat of outcasts and your counters to leverage powerful boss monsters like Carnifex and Maledictus, who can threaten game-ending circumstances by themselves. Remember, all of your resources on field here are essentially potential pluses. When Ethereal Slash goes to the graveyard, you can actually shuffle it back into your deck and draw a card, if you banish a DD Cabaret monster. Then you can use the never-ending DD Cabaret to tribute Psychopomp if she survives, which can immediately set the same trap again, or Feast or Famine. This forms a really ruthless loop. Well, a semi-loop that is, as you access a greater toolbox of effects, and your opponent is constantly under threat of these cards from the graveyard as long as you have a counter and field presence advantage. That is the core strategy of DD Cabaret, excluding their secondary archetype. Okay. So, now we've looked through the basics of how Cabaret function on their own. I want to draw attention to how they function with their secondary archetype, and not only function with them to obtain a higher ceiling, but also can support them in resolving their plays. In this case, I'm going to use Evil Twin as an example. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to open with Lila. There's a lot of ways to get it. And the Never-Ending DD Cabaret. And DD Cabaret Exhorter, precisely because although she's one of the best monsters, she is the worst Cabaret to open when you have no other Cabaret monsters for obvious reasons. So we're going to start by normal summoning Lila and resolving her effect. As long as this effect resolves, you are practically guaranteed to get your Evil Twin play off, even if they destroy everything on resolution. If this effect does not resolve, you can still potentially resolve it via Phantasmagoria's effect to send your missing Evil Twin name, live twin name. So we're going to summon Kishiko Frost, and then we're going to just presume that our opponent Dogmatic punishments on resolution. So these both die. Now, we'll activate the Never-Ending DD Cabaret and use its effect to set Outcasts as in the last replay. Oops, pardon me. As with before, we're not going to activate it immediately. We'll tribute Exhorter and add 6 counters to the Never-Ending DD Cabaret. Then we'll flip the field. Now, depending on the other state of your hand, you might add other cards, but for this case, any level 4 works. Now, we're going to use Exhorter's effect. And then Exhorter has a continuous effect that can be used once per duel to let you summon a level 4 Cabaret for free. My apologies, I should have mentioned that as part of Exhorter's condition, she can modulate her level to either 4 or 8. So obviously in this case, you would level modulate her to 4. Make Phantasmagoria as expected. And then send Exhorter to, detach Exhorter, to send a copy of Psychopomp as before. Trigger Psychopomp's effect. And in this case, Eva is good. I'll stick with Ethereal Slash for now, as it's a more familiar card to you viewing, I hope. And then we will banish Exhorter to fulfill Terpsichorean's alternate summoning condition, which can be triggered whenever you have 2 face-up DD Cabaret spells. Then we'll use her effect to place 6 counters on herself. And Psychopomp's effect to remove all of the counters we have on the field in order to summon not only herself, but one of the live twins back. And from there, I'm sorry, that's actually suboptimal. And from there, you simply resolve your Evil Twin play. Quite as normal. Draw a card off Lila. That's a good draw. And make Sunny, as well as having Frost in graveyard for the additional draw during your opponent's turn. Now, the reason I said it was suboptimal to use Psychopomp as material rather than Terpsichorean is twofold. The first one is because Psychopomp is threatening with Never-Ending, as mentioned in the last replay, but the second is because when you have multiple interruptions on board, you generally don't want Terpsichorean around because she can make it more difficult to stop some of your opponent's more powerful spells from resolving. Essentially, if you have Terpsichorean on the field, you cannot use Phantasmagoria's negate to negate their spells because it has to target. And that's why she's essentially a double-sided card. So you can see how Psychopomp can help any light or dark deck reconnect its plays after interaction. And additionally, having a secondary variant helps the Cabaret deck, I should say, because of the existence of Awakening the DD Cabaret. Awakening the DD Cabaret is a quick play spell which can often respond to, say, an infinite impermanence your opponent attempts on a monster, tributing it on resolution, and then summoning a DD Cabaret monster from your hand or deck, which can bring out Psychopomp or Carnifex straight away, which is extremely useful. This combined with the fact that DD Cabaret neither has exactly the consistency nor the ceiling to be used on its own, but also does not consume a normal summon, is why DD Cabaret essentially requires a supporting archetype, or at least is best with them.